Hey everybody, Dan Rubino joined once again by Jay Bennett, and while Raphael's in absentia, we don't know where he is, but he'll be joining us shortly. And we got special guest Justin Angel from Nokia joining us this week, which should be a lot of fun. We have a lot of stuff to talk about, but we're going to try to keep it to actually 60 minutes, where we have a strict deadline now. So, Jay, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good, thank you. I'm pretty good. Excited to find out if our new podcast structure is actually going to work, but that's something that we'll figure out in the next 60 minutes.
And
how's
Justin?
Yourself?
Oh, I'm hanging in there. Yeah, Justin, welcome to our show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
How are you? Now you're still in Canada, correct?
No, I'm actually living in San Francisco nowadays. I used to live in Canada while I was working for Microsoft as the civil program manager there, and now I work for Nokia. So I'm down in San Francisco in the Bay Area. It's quite nice.
Oh, gotcha. Wow, tough life, huh?
Yeah, it's terrible.
Now San Francisco, my God.
Yeah, living in the most livable city in North America, which is Vancouver, and then living in the Bay Area, which is known for its hard work ethic and non-technological savvy people. It's a very hard life, for sure.
Very good. Well, I suppose we should head right into the guest interview. We don't want to keep Justin too long. He's busy trying to get all those exciting phones into people's hands out there.
Okay.
I guess, Jay, you want to take over the interview here since you're the developer? You probably have the most questions for him.
Absolutely. And I'm going to start off just saying that today's show is brought to you by Audible. Please visit audiblepodcast.com/WPC for a free audiobook download. Justin, first of all, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate you coming along, and we know we're keeping you from a busy life at Nokia. I thought we'd start off the interview as we're sort of hopefully trying to do with all our interviews by asking a little bit about what it is you do at Nokia at the moment and what's a typical day in your work.
Oh my typical day has nothing to do with my role description, so let's start with that. My role description in Nokia is to pitch in with Windows Phone 7 expert knowledge wherever it's needed. So that's pretty much that. I try and be a knowledge resource for people around me who need advice on third-party application development, whether it be our engagement with what we call the breadth community, which is everyone who's doing Windows Phone 7 development, or some more top apps kind of people. Basically, that's what I'm looking at. I'm also looking at what are we shipping right now? How can we work better with developers? In terms of what my normal day looks like, there's really no such thing. I wake up at about 6:30 in the morning. By 7:30, I'm on a train. And on that train, I spend about an hour reading documents. So as my first day in the job, as someone told me, you're about 2 years late to the party. So I'm now reading documents in insane pace, trying to catch up on that. I've recently learned how to build a phone from scratch. I wish that was a joke, but I know. It's very exciting for me. And when I get to the office,
So does this mean you can build me one and you can send me one over? Is that how it works? Or?
Well, I can't actually build it from scratch, but I can conceptually understand how it works, which is much better than how it used to work, where I thought phones equals fairies equals works. So,
hang on, are you telling me that the Nokia phones aren't built by fairies? Because you may have just shattered a dream there.
I know. They are not, in fact, powered by magical gnomes. It's an unfortunate fact. But
it's Chinese workers now. Sorry.
It's Finnish, isn't it, for Nokia, as far as I know?
Yeah. Yep. Nokia is headquartered in Finland, which is very interesting for me because I started trying to learn Finnish to make it easier for my Finnish coworkers. And it is a very interesting language, I'll say that. I don't believe anyone under 2 can speak this language. The color pink, which is Valinen Punainen, is about 16 characters long and has 9 vowels. I don't accept any 2-year-old being able to say that.
Hey, as a linguist, I can tell you'll have a very difficult time acquiring a second language this late in life. No offense. I'm just saying statistically.
So you are right now. I've just found that even trying to learn anything regarding any languages that isn't Java or C# in my case is the only language I've managed to learn since I went past 18, really. So, Justin, I'm sort of having a look back through our coverage of yourself here. As you might have noticed, we sent you over a link which aggregates all our stories that involve you. And I'm looking at 30th of November was when we reported that you'd been snagged, as we reported, as principal engineer on Windows Phone Developer Experience. Since then, I've sort of been looking around and seeing what you've provided. And I think one of the main things I've recently noticed, you've been looking after a developers wiki over at Nokia. I don't know how often that gets contributed to, but I've certainly found some useful stuff on there.
Yeah, so the Windows Phone 7 developer wiki on developer.nokia.com is actually really interesting because in all the time I've been in the Microsoft ecosystem, and I've been with .NET since 2001, I've never seen a kind of official wiki from any company. And it's really interesting to see that Nokia has that. And the Windows Phone 7 developer wiki on Nokia.com actually has 311 articles, which is crazy.
Wow.
It's like this entire thing existed, and I knew nothing about that. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm actually going to be spending some time on that, trying to make sure that people know that we have this amazing content. And in terms of what I've been doing with that wiki in the meanwhile, is that I've been adding some information that has to do with our Windows Phone 7.5 refresh content. So what do you need to know about the Lumia 610 devices?
Okay. So we're just going to quickly, before we get on to Nokia, because we've got an awful lot to talk about there, I thought we'd just highlight a couple of things that we've got from you before your Nokia days. And the one that comes around an awful lot is the Pandora third-party SDK that you were working on. Can you tell us anything about that? Is that something Nokia will let you talk about now?
They probably won't, but I'll give you the short sentence on that. It's instead of building a Pandora app, I decided to build an SDK that allows third-party developers to build Pandora apps. And there are now 3 Pandora apps. Then they have more than 1,000 reviews combined and an average score of 4 or 4.5. So it's pretty awesome that, instead of, well, I'm saying it's pretty awesome for what I did, but I think it's nice that instead of building my own app, I help build an ecosystem of apps, which is kind of the approach I've always been taking. In my career in Microsoft, I helped build the, the Silverlight Toolkit, which is the #1 open source framework on Silverlight and Windows Phone. So I'm really, really excited with this kind of stuff. My blog, both of them, my old Silverlight blog and my current Windows 8 themed blog, justinangel.net, are both open source. I think if you look at my Codeplex page, I've got like 10, maybe 11 projects that I'm a contributor to in terms of open source.
Oh, that's fun. Okay, so we'll move back on to Nokia and also your time since there. One of the main articles that we've actually got for you since your time at Nokia was that you were involved in one of the great Nokia giveaways, as I sort of tend to call them. You gave away, I believe it was 5 Lumia 800s to homebrew developers. I presume, did you push for that, or did Nokia just sort of say, hey, here's 5 phones, give them to whoever seems fit?
It was exactly the second scenario. So I just got them even before I started working in Nokia. Like, here's some phones, do something with them. I'm like, okay, I think I could figure out what to do with these. Thank you. I gave out 5 phones to the people who I felt could do the most impact there. And I'm really happy to see what they've come up with. These are the people who are building theme browsers and screen captures and stuff like that for Windows Phone. So I'm really excited about that personally. I can't say that if Nokia is doing anything about it or if we're going to engage the community, but it's definitely an interesting future ahead.
Well, you guys only gave away 20,000 phones, right, to developers across the world?
I believe the official number is, and again, this is information I got from your blog, so I could be wrong.
It's 25, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But something around there, and it's really interesting, and we're still giving out those devices as we go along, so it's really interesting.
Okay. Well, I've seen a lot of Nokia giving them out even to mobile industry, none of whom I can chat about, but they're seeding them to the right people is certainly the way I would describe it. We're going to move on to talk about a little bit of news now, because half the reason that we got Justin here is to discuss some of the biggest news that's happened in the past couple of weeks. And we should probably say that the podcast is now going to be a bi-weekly or fortnightly event and on a nice strict 60-minute schedule, which I know we've said before, but we really mean it this time, I promise. And we're going to start out with, just quickly, myself and Dan. Dan, you were at Mobile World Congress a couple of weeks back, and you got your hands on the Nokia Lumia 610. For anyone who hasn't been keeping an eye on the Lumia 610 or doesn't quite understand what it's about, it's supposedly the budget phone, if you like, the mid-range or mid-tier, as Nokia are calling it, range of devices. And it's targeted below the Lumia 710 and targeted towards people who are interested in, also towards people who want to get on the first rung, if you like, of the smartphone ladder, perhaps get a bit of a smartphone experience towards or on their standard feature phones, but not necessarily want to pay for the top-end hardware or the level of hardware that would be required to run everything about Windows Phone. Dan, you had a bit of a chance to have a bit of a hands-on with the 610. What were your thoughts?
Total crap. No, actually, yeah, I mean, considering it's the budget phone for Nokia, and some people were sort of downplaying it, it's actually really built nicely. I think a lot of people, even today, would still be pretty happy with this phone in the United States. And I think it's definitely geared for emerging markets, but we also see it's going to probably come to some European countries too. And I think that's a smart decision. The build quality, I would put it up there higher than like the Samsung Focus. It's just got this really nice feel in the hand to it. Yeah, it has this just a great finish, and I don't know, I was really impressed with it. Now, it does lack the clear black display, and of course, it doesn't have an AMOLED screen, so some of those higher, functions of the phone aren't there. And in that sense, it just has a normal LCD screen, which is still actually a really nice screen. Now, of course, it has only a 256 megs of RAM on board and an 800 megahertz processor. But because Windows Phone is so efficient and fast, you don't really notice that too much. I'm sure if you load games and stuff, it won't be as fast and you'll sort of notice it. But in of itself, independently, if you don't compare it to other phones, it's actually a really nice device. And it just shows you, I think, that Nokia's build quality just tends to be so high. I mean, I'm a big fan of the HTC Radar, but I keep coming back to, the Lumia 710 on T-Mobile is active. And I got the cool new back for it with the blue. And I don't know, I just keep coming back to these phones for some reason. They just feel really, really nice, and the build quality is just so nice of them. So I think Nokia is onto something here. And I think going after this lower end market is a big thing. But we've even heard from them that even where the 610 cuts some corners and everything, it's still not as low as they'd like to go. And, as far as price points. So we'll have to see, 2012, 2013 has been argued as a big year where smartphones will come below $99. And that's going to be an important marker, I think, for the smartphone business.
I can completely agree with you. But you picked up on there the 256 megabytes of RAM, and that is partially what we're going to talk about. So the way the story plays out, we have the full list of limitations that have been officially confirmed for Tango, or 7.5 refresh, as we should officially call it. And I'll go through those limitations a little bit shortly in a short time. But effectively, I was looking through the developer documentation to have a look at exactly what we were dealing with for developers. And I published a story out to the site. It was back 27th of February now, regarding the fact that generic background tasks don't run on Windows Phone Tango or refresh with these lower end hardware. There are other aspects as well, but the story effectively goes that quite quickly on, Justin had a little tweet to me and wanted to point out a couple of things and make a very good point that it's not fragmentation as I'd originally postulated to our community, and put on a nice bit of a blog post to confirm that as well, which is actually why Justin is here, because he's now going to tell us a little bit more about exactly what this developer limitation is and perhaps the reasons behind this decision. So that's a nice open-ended question for you, Justin.
Yeah, so it is. Thank you for that, Jay.
You're welcome.
So I should mention that I am calling in from a Lumia 610 phone, which I've had for about a month now since I joined the company. So I like it too. It's working. It works really well. I really do like it. So talking about
the sound quality.
Yeah, you're on Skype calling in over like Wi-Fi on the 610?
Yeah.
That is
that's good sound quality. We're quite
impressed. It is really good sound quality. My God.
Wow. Cool. If there was ever an advertisement, yeah.
Well, if I get disconnected in 5 minutes, I guess that there's going to be a problem, but I hope that's not going to be the case. So talking about the phone and the lower end spec, so I'm really excited about this fourth Lumia phone and the fact that it's the most affordable of all Lumia phones. In order to make it a bit more affordable, we've really done a couple of things there. I think the things that people are really, really going to be interested in is it's got a slightly lower end CPU and a slightly lower end memory. And both of those things shouldn't mean anything to most developers. I think 95% of apps, so only 5% of apps actually care about that, but 95% of apps are going to just run and be okay and aren't going to be aware of this. The apps are going to have a problem, or the apps are doing something a bit more unconventional and doesn't actually follow the guidelines that we have for Windows Phone. So talking about those guidelines, for example, for, I think, almost 2 years now, since MIX 2010, when the first Windows Phone 7 certification guidelines shipped, there's always been a recommendation on file. Hey, could you please make sure that your app doesn't exceed 90 megabytes? Up until now, it hasn't been checked thoroughly. Starting the Windows Phone 7.5 refresh, it is going to be checked. So we are going to start. So Microsoft is going to start using 256 megabyte phones to do certification from this point onwards. So you will see certification failures if you're using more than that 90 megabyte on 256 megabyte devices. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, when people hear that, it's like, oh my gosh, fragmentation, no! So I would like to explain.
That one, Jay?
So I would
I postulated. I didn't suggest.
I like that. So, in terms of what this means for developers, it means almost nothing. That you've got 256 megabytes versus 512 megabyte, and the reason why it doesn't mean anything,
you're giving me a little bit more work to do because unfortunately WP Central falls under that category.
Let's talk about that category, but I would like to call it the general difference and then deep dive into specifics. So, in terms of what the general difference is, it's very, very little. You should always be using 90 megabytes. And even though the 256 megabyte phone doesn't have 90 megabytes to give to apps, it gives you 60 megabytes as what we call working set limit, which exists on Windows and exists everywhere. But then we go on and we page the other memory that you need. So you still get 90 megabytes of RAM like you're on a 512 device. So for that perspective, there's really no difference in the amount of RAM you can consume on a 512 device and a 256 megabyte device. The real difference comes in what happens if you want to consume more than 90 megabytes. And some games do end up doing that on 512 devices, and they say, oh, I've got this extra memory, I'll use it, which is fine. But the guideline is that all apps should stick to 90 megabytes worth of RAM. And because of that, a couple of apps that were reviewed by Microsoft, and actually this is true for all apps across the marketplace. There's telemetry data on all of them. And if any app uses more than 90 megabytes and phones that have authorized to send feedback back to Microsoft have sent back that feedback, and there's data that shows an app uses more than 90 megabytes, that app has been proactively disqualified from running on 90 megabyte devices. Sorry, from 256 megabyte devices. That's the interesting part here. So after doing that, we've seen less than 5% of the market has actually ended up being disqualified. So we know we're on the right track here, and we're hoping to get that down to 0, because we want all apps to run on the Lumia 610.
And of course, the other thing that it involves is it means that we'll put that limitation to the side, but it means that there's less RAM available, of course, for these background agents, which is why that feature has been disabled as well. And there's also, my understanding, the ability to actually multitask within Windows Phone 7.5 refresh when using these lower end devices. Now,
actually, Jay, let me just stop you right there. That's not true.
Absolutely.
You do have multitasking for Windows Phone 7.5. You do have background audio, for example. So if I'm listening to iHeartRadio or Slacker Radio, I can still open up another app and still listen to music. That's fine. If I've got data transfer background, that would still work. So if I've got like a Dropbox client or whatever, that's still going to keep working on these phones. And that's really important for us. Also, stuff called schedulers. So that's alarms and can't remember the other thing. It's alarms and notifications are still going to keep on working. The only thing that's really been disabled is the ability to run generic background agents. And that means any arbitrary code the developer wishes to execute. And even within the strict limitations that exist for those generic background agents, we just couldn't get everything to work the way we want to and keep the experience fast and fluid on this hardware. So those have been disabled. But only a very small segment of apps use those. I think the core thing I would say about generic background agents is that they don't necessarily work on 512 megabyte devices either. They can work on 512 megabyte devices, but users can go in and just disable your background agent. As an app, you can't assume it's there because the user can just go in and turn it off. And as a developer, if you have 10 apps that have background agents, the 11th app or the 10th app, depends on the phone, won't actually be able to run a background agent. It won't be it won't be even able to register it. So there is never the expectation for background agents to be a core functionality piece within the Mango or Windows Phone 7.5 release. It really is all about icing on the cake. So what can we do a bit extra by having these background agents? Not what is the core functionality we're going to put there.
So I should clarify, when I said multitasking, I should have said fast app switching, which is the other feature, I believe, which has been disabled.
Actually, that does work. So let's talk about fast app switching. You do still have fast app switching, and we've updated the MSDN documentation to make sure that that's very clear on 256 megabyte devices. But there's obviously less RAM to consume. And fast app switching means we keep applications in memory and switch between them very, very fast. When you have less memory, we can switch less apps in memory, right? So if you have two 90 megabyte apps in memory, it's going to be really difficult for us to find that room within 256 megabytes of memory. So that's why the reason we're saying, hey, we still have fast application switching, but just to be aware that we can actually fast application switch between less apps, and those apps are going to get tombstone more and more often. But that could still happen on 512 devices. Even on any 512 device, if you start navigating 10 apps in, the 10th app in the backstack, that's going to get tombstone. So that's the same behavior.
Which is actually a very good point that I wanted to bring up, because it was something that concerned me about Tango, is that I think we'll start to see developers have to, once again, just like we're developing for Nodo, focus on tombstoning apps and ensuring that the tombstoning experience is seamless, because it's one of the things that you could easily forget about with the new fast app switching in Mango. So it'll be good, hopefully, for developers listening, make sure that your apps are tombstoning correctly.
Right, and the certification guidelines do talk about tombstoning, so that is a scenario that's getting tested. So hopefully that's also being tested through certification. And it's always been important to make sure that you have good tombstoning in your app. I remember back in PDC 10, we even talked about how to optimize your tombstoning experience, right? How to make it faster, how to bring it down to like the minimum of milliseconds. And that really does bring me into my second topic here, which is I do want to call out that we've shipped a second emulator now as part of the Windows Phone 7.5 refresh, or the Windows Phone 7.1.1 SDK. And as part of that, there's a 256 emulator. So if you don't have a 256 megabyte device next to you and you don't run a test on it, that's totally fine and acceptable, and we think that's something you could do. You can just open up Visual Studio and test on a new 256 megabyte emulator, which we think is going to give you a good snapshot of where you are in terms of memory. And the cool stuff with that is that in Windows Phone 7.5, we've actually shipped a memory profiler, and it is the nicest memory profiler I've seen in 10 years in working in .NET. And it's got all the features.
Can't agree with you more there. It's so much. It identified what was wrong with our app in about 15 seconds of me just running it once. I like the
fact that the profiler says, "Oh, you want me to profile this and give you advice? Okay, we could do that. That's easy." It's like, I like the fact that the profiler just assumes that it understands why I'm looking at it. It's not because I would like to profile memory. It's because there's a problem and I need a solution. I like that that's how it's built. But if you need more information than just the top level, hey, there's a problem, you could actually look at specifically what's on memory in every given second when your application is executing. So that's very interesting for us.
Just a quick question I have, just to bring it down a notch from a non-developer perspective. I know a lot of people have the question, and I'm pretty sure this is affirmative, but live tiles should still work with Tango apps. Is that correct? Like, for instance, the Microsoft Weather app that just came out is now Tango optimized. So on a 256 meg device, those live tiles will still update in the background?
That's a great question. So I should call out that live tiles are still going to be supported on Tango. There's one caveat to that, which is some apps are using the new generic background agents to update their live tiles. They would now have to move to use push notifications to do so. So instead of using generic background agents, you now have to go back to using push notifications. I think we're very lucky, at least in my perspective of lucky, which is generic background agents have only been supported for a few months now. So there's not a lot of apps that use those. So if we say, hey, you really should move to push notifications, they should do. There's not going to be a lot of apps impacted by that. But even if there are, even if a couple of apps, let's say 1-2% of apps, lost their live tiles, that doesn't destroy the app, right? Most apps will still have rich data and fast and fluid experiences that could function without having a live tile. It's a somewhat degraded experience, but it's not a terribly bad experience. It's actually a very good user experience that you're still going to get, because all you lose is the live tile. And talking about live tiles, I should mention that secondary tiles are still totally supported on Tango with no difference. So if you want to have multiple tiles that link into your application, that's still definitely going to work.
Good stuff.
Good. That's good enough. I think a lot of people will be kind of relieved to know that functionality is still there. It's not crippling the experience too much. So
it is, and provided that developers have the resources or availability to get up some kind of cloud-based system to deal with their push notifications, it's perfectly reasonable to do it. It's just not quite as simple as background agents made it. But so be it. And it's something which will be, thankfully, Microsoft have provided a really good way of testing for 256 megabyte devices and disabling certain features or not enabling certain features based on those tests. So it should be really easy for us developers to say, oh, okay, you've not got the right kind of phone. I'm going to slightly change the way my app behaves on your phone. Or there is even, of course, the option for developers who really don't want to deal with this or want to just focus on the high-end devices. You can choose to opt out entirely of the 256 megabyte options, and we should make that pretty clear.
Right. So let's talk about that for a sec. So you brought up two interesting points. One is that a few apps would need to make a few small code changes. So let's talk about how many apps that are. That's less than 5% of apps, and those are code changes that are literally an if condition. It's a couple of lines of code, and we've given very specific guidance to what that should be. So hey, you really shouldn't use page transitions because it keeps 2 pages in memory. So instead of having the nice transition effect, you should just go from one page to the other. So it does reduce the UX by a bit, but it still gives you a really good experience. You shouldn't use in-app maps or in-app's web browser control because those go into your application memory as opposed to using the standalone web browsers and maps, and those end up managing their memory alone. So that's much better. And there's a couple of other of these pointers that we're looking for people to look at. Don't use images that are huge and get scaled down in memory. Use images the size of, maximum the size of your screen. If you have large lists,
what we've done wrong.
Really?
That's our issue. That the images aren't huge by any means of the necessary, but because we bring in quite a few of them for the app, they could be smaller. And what I was originally doing was bringing in the full size image so that people could flick through them. Whereas now we're going to go the option of having 2. We'll bring in a more of a thumbnail style for the listings, and we'll have the larger images on demand when you want them. It's just it was where I was being a little bit of a lazy developer, and I'll admit to it.
That's fine. I think as long as it works, right, that's good. I think the point here is if you have run the marketplace certification test kit that exists within Visual Studio and say, hey, can you check my memory usage if it meets certification, you would probably have seen that it goes over 90 and you would fail. And the problem is we couldn't have tested that for those scenarios previously, and now certification is going to start testing for that. I think the second point that you brought up earlier is very interesting as well, which is opting out from 256 megabyte. So I'm going to give you the real story as to how this came about and why we even have apps that are opted out from these wonderful phones. As I mentioned, a couple of apps do end up using more than 90 megabytes of memory, less than 5%. And at that point, if you look at this independently from Microsoft, from Nokia, from anyone, if you look at this independently, you ask, well, what can you do about this? One thing you could do about it is say, hey, how about you just remove all of those apps from Marketplace? And no one wants to do that, right? No one wants to remove 5% of the apps, even though they're breaking certification guidelines. So what we said is, okay, let's temporarily disqualify them and let the developers fix them on their own time. Let them keep running on the 512 devices they're already running on. And next time the developer goes through through certification, then they're going to have to make sure they fixed it. So we keep all the existing apps where they are, and we're saying, hey, next time you go through the certification, we've noticed you don't necessarily meet all the guidelines. Could you please make sure you do?
Interesting. Yeah, and of course the communication has gone out to those developers who have got that issue. We're running a little bit short on time now, so I'm going to move on to questions from our chat room. So guys, if you've got any questions that you want to ask Justin, now is the time to send them on in. The first one here is from Jimo Tagi, has asked, will the marketplace test, to your knowledge, and that is the certification test, which obviously each market app goes through, will it be fixed now to tell developers specifically this won't be allowed into 256 megabyte phones, and will they be told roughly why that is?
So it's a really interesting question. So in terms of all the apps in the marketplace right now, there is, as I mentioned earlier, telemetry data that shows, hey, you're using more than 90 megabytes. And everyone who has one of those apps have gotten an email. By the way, I'm going to confess to something I've never told publicly. I'm one of those people. I have an app that's 3,500 spots from the top, and it didn't get manually tested. A lot of top apps got manually tested, and it just got the telemetry data stuff. And I got an email that says, hey, you're using too much memory, and it got disqualified from 256. And I ended up using transition service, so the page transitions, and I had to turn it off. So people did get notified.
I have to thank you for that, because now it means that I won't get fired by Daniel at the end of this, because it's not just me.
Oh, hey, quick, I have a question. Justin, you going to update your apps to be Mango?
I already have done that locally. For me, it's just about getting the time to publish that. And I'm already going to do that. I'm really excited about some of the features I've got built on my machine and on my devices for a couple of months, and I just haven't published it. I'm a terrible person. But I know. I'm like,
Okay.
I'm enjoying the features. Why would I care about anyone else? But I will be publishing my own apps, the United Nations News and Neurons, and I will be updating them very, very soon. I also been working on a couple of other apps, but I just need the time to finish those up, which, as you can imagine, is a bit in short supply right now.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
to come back to the question from the chat room, so we have let all the developers know that have any sort of 256 megabyte disqualification from the Windows Phone store, why that is, and sorry, from the app marketplace.
Yes.
And for developers going through certification again, we're going to be testing on 256 megabyte devices going forward. They're going to know, hey, you're using more than 90 megabytes. At that point, the developer has the options of figuring out why that is. I think the easiest way at that point is to open up the memory profiler or put an on-screen memory indicator, like there's one from Coding for Fun and whatnot, and just figure out what you're doing that's using that much memory. I think the best thing you could do if you get one of those notifications is to read one of two resources that I cannot recommend strongly enough. One of them is really the developer wiki for Nokia, and I will give you the link so you could put that in the show comments. And it has a really extensive article. One as to how to profile memory, and another one as to what you should be doing. So obviously games is a bit different, so there's a bit of that we haven't discussed here. And I do recommend people go and read that. The other one is from Microsoft. There was a really, really good Inside Windows Phone podcast about, what was it, a couple of days ago, and Mike Batista and Larry Lieberman just talked about everything Microsoft has done to optimize the operating system to get to this point. And it's also a really good resource if you have time for that. And I'll give you the link so you could put that in the show notes.
That's
and
good,
I apologize for plugging another podcast.
Oh, we're not too strict on that here. Okay, I think we're mostly out of questions there. The only other one that's come up, I'm fairly sure we can't ask you, so I'm not even going to try, and we'll answer towards the end of the podcast. So, Justin, I say thank you very much for your time. Daniel, do you have any more questions, or are you happy to let him go?
I'm sure I'll think about them 5 minutes after he leaves, but as of right now,
That's
cool.
Good stuff.
So it's been a pleasure being here. Thank you all for listening, and I'm signing off now. Bye-bye.
Great.
Okay, thank you, Justin.
Justin.
And here we go. So to Danny and to Michael, who asked a question, we'll pick that one up at the end of the podcast, I promise. But we're not going to ask Justin that question, as there were a couple of things that were, of course, off the radar for us. I'd like to just reiterate once again, today's show is brought to you by Audible. Please visit audiblepodcast.com/WPC for your free audiobook download. And of course, everyone knows that listening to audio to books is much better than reading them because it requires much less use of your hands. That's about as much as I can come up with. And of course,
there's a certain irony to using Audible too.
There is, but it's a great service, and I genuinely am one of those people who prefers listening to my books because my eyes get too tired otherwise. So there you go. So if you feel like it, go and download. I know The Hobbit. That would be a good one to listen to because obviously get yourself ready for the film coming out sometime soon. So we're going to move on now, and we're going to move on to the big stories of the last 2 weeks, and of course the biggest story that we can really cover, which was mostly covered on Mobile Nations podcast, is Mobile World Congress. So Daniel, how was Barcelona?
Let me summarize that whole week. Mobile World Congress is great. It was, I think it was a little bit of a letdown overall for Windows Phone news in general. It was definitely dominated by Nokia, which is always nice to have them dominate the news. And then to a lesser extent, ZTE with their Orbit phone. But overall, it was nice to see. Nokia really wowed everybody, I think, both with their 610, of course, announcing the Lumia 900 going international, and then also, of course, the PureView 41 megapixel camera phone. And so it was a good event. Nokia's booth was huge. It was a really big section of the conference, which was nice. And they had whole areas dedicated to developers. They had some developers showcasing their apps, which were just announced and released during that same time period. They're also showing off some of their tools, which we did a video of, showing how you can generate before we showed how you can generate a banner using a Nokia banner generator, and you type in your app, you give it the marketplace code, and it would generate an ad for you. Now it can do full video, and that's coming out in a couple of weeks. And so that was actually pretty impressive. And, Nokia's presence was really nicer. You really felt it. HTC was to much lesser extent, of course, and LG and everybody else were pretty much missing. So
I think a lot of people were quite disappointed to not see anything from Samsung there. I have to say, I was part of me was expecting them to come and do something. Maybe they're just too busy fighting legal battles with Apple at the moment. But
well, if people who are on the site right now, if they refresh the page, they'll see a story just went up that the Samsung Mandel 4G LTE phone just passed the FCC, and so that looks to be headed to AT&T here in the United States. So that will be another phone that's coming. So that's a trifecta for LTE phones coming to AT&T. We'll have the Lumia 900, the HTC Titan 2, and now the Samsung Mandel, which I'm sure will be actually renamed when it comes out. But yeah, that's going to be an interesting, I'm curious if it's going to be like the Focus S just with LTE, or it's going to be a little bit of different design. Either way, I think it'll be kind of a big win for them, just because the Focus S is a really nice device, and especially since they've kind of tweaked it up recently. Throwing LTE in there, could definitely be a nice design. So we'll have to see.
Sounds interesting. So going back to MWC, we've already talked about the Lumia 610, our thoughts on that, but we shouldn't just limit ourselves to Nokia. There was, of course, the ZTE Orbit. Did you get a chance to play with that one?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, we have a nice little hands-on video with it. It's an okay phone. It's definitely, this is where you feel a difference. It, too, is a low-end for emerging markets phone, and it's kind of nicely built. ZTE stuff, I think, is kind of nice. It has definitely potential. I would still say the 610 kind of blows it away in terms of quality. Yeah. And the unit we played with was still had some issues. The capacitive buttons weren't responding very well, but I'll chalk that up to being sort of a prototype device. But it was, it's an interesting phone, and I'm always nice. I think it's great to see other OEMs on board and bringing, their designs to Windows Phone. But ZTE has some ambitious plans. They want to actually come to the United States and start selling phones, specifically more high-end things in 4G type. So I'm curious whether or not they'll be able to actually do that, as breaking the U.S. market is very difficult. But they're a company that's trying to follow the HTC model. For if people recall, like 2006, 2007, HTC was just a OEM, ODM. They would design devices for other companies and then just market them. And so we always had these weird, confusing names. And then HTC finally broke out and said, we're going to do our own stuff. We're going to do our own branding. And it was rough for a while. It took them a long time, but it was about 2 years. They finally now are, a standard name. Heck, they're up there with HTC, LG, everybody else. So they're trying to follow what looks like the same model. So I would say ZTE is a company to look out for. Whether or not they have the same talent as HTC remains to be seen. But.
And certainly, I wasn't quite sure what to make of it. And I noticed they had customized it a little bit, hadn't they? The home screen or the start
they didn't.
screen. Sorry.
No, that wasn't true actually. Yeah, at least on the actual unit we played with, there was no customization. The only customization that they had was an accent color that was unique. But the actual tiles and the backgrounds were all the same. So that was a mock-up image that was kind of thrown around. But as far as we can tell, the actual device definitely did not have any of that on board. And so, and when we played with it, I only had 256 megs of RAM. So it's debate whether or not it's going to ship with that. But supposedly it did had NFC on board. So.
Oh, okay. And Jim Otagi wants to ask you, by the way, if you got any Android badges. Apparently, stalls were giving them away. Do you find yourself looking for Android badges?
No. Unfortunately not. Mobile World Congress is really huge. I believe they had over 60,000 people attending, and it's a pretty big conference to walk around in. And what ends up happening, it was just me pretty much doing Windows Phone stuff. We had Simon Sage helping out a bit too from Mobile Nations. But you end up getting kind of focused in your one little area, and with interviews and meeting up with people, and you tend to not browse as much as you'd like to. So I didn't have time to do any Android stuff.
Sounds good. So let's go on to something I know you're quite keen to talk about, as you're quite into your cameras. Let's talk about Nokia's PureView, because whilst it might not be applicable to Windows Phone right at this very second, we are very, very certain that it is coming to Windows Phone. Probably not to Apollo or to Windows Phone 8, but we can probably expect this PureView 41 megapixel tech. So you got a little bit of a chance to have a play with one, if I'm right.
Yeah, we got to use one. It's gorgeous. It is a little big and chunky, but what do you want for something with 41 megapixels on board?
Exactly.
Now, we should point out that this isn't just a 41 megapixel sensor, sort of like what the Titan 2 has done, where it's just double the amount of pixels that are on the sensor. This is actually using a whole different algorithm and technology that's akin to what they use from satellites. And so it selectively uses pixels, and you can actually shoot at 5, 8, or 38 megapixel. And when you shoot at 38 megapixel, you get extreme high detail that you can keep cropping in and zoom in and get a lot of like detail in that photo. But if you shoot at 5 or 8 megapixel, the pixels end up doubling, and you get basically a super concentrated, really beautiful looking photo. And so it actually selectively uses the pixels on board. And so we haven't seen too much as far as low light, high ISO shooting, which is sort of the important test here for this kind of device. But it's not just jamming pixels onto a sensor, which is real important to point out here.
Yeah, it's very important, because otherwise it's a marketing slogan if it's just 41 megapixels.
Yeah, they've actually developed some interesting technology here with this stuff, which is partly why you're not going to see it just poured into Windows Phone right away. They've been working on this for quite some time, and to be able to just bring this into the operating system of Windows Phone, which doesn't support half of that. Don't forget, it also shoots in unusual formats. And part of it saves some of the formats it saves to are more economical for if you want to shoot a 38 megapixel photo and you want to email that. Yeah, you don't want to send a 30 megabyte file to people, so it can actually shrink down the file.
I'm actually quite curious to hear. So for people in the chat room, if you just want to drop us a little note, obviously the camera makes the phone a bit chunkier. I just want to know a couple of words answer. Would you buy a phone which has a crazy camera on the back of it? Is it something that you'd value, to have a really good quality camera you can just pull out of your phone and take something that will be a really high quality camera? And the response is already coming in. Yes, 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 yes. 1 no, 2 no's. So it looks like actually the majority of people are saying yes. D Swink says yes. Jason's saying nope. Which means that it's going to be divided. But actually, I'm going to go with a completely unscientific. About 80% of people would want one of these, this camera on the back of their phone.
Yeah, and although it's kind of thick, I want to say that it's sort of more top heavy. So actually, when you hold it in your hand, it's just a top third that is a little bit big. But when you hold it in your hand part is actually just gripping the bottom 2/3, which feels like a normal phone. So so the camera kind of hangs off the back end of your hand. So it actually feels pretty ergonomical, and when you're holding it, it doesn't feel too bad.
The thing which also got me, it actually has a proper flash on the back of it, obviously, doesn't it, as well, rather than a stupid LED one, which actually is one of the things I loved most about I think was it the Mozart that did that as well?
Right, the xenon flash, right.
Yeah. It makes such a difference, especially at nighttime photographs. I'm a bit of a night owl. I know you are as well, so it does make something of a difference. And Jilly Squeeze has made a very interesting comment that I can't read out on air. But there you go. If you're in the chat room, laugh at that. So that's the PureView. And as we said, it is coming to Windows phones at some point. We know Nokia do intend to bring it over. Just pull back. One of the things that was interesting and came out of it, so I say interesting, it wasn't quite Mobile World Congress, but it is quite a big news story we want to talk about. I believe it's an editorial that you wrote yourself, actually, Monday last week. About Nokia still needs a cheaper phone to compete with Android, because obviously we've been talking about the budget phones, we've been talking about the 610, and you wrote up a little interesting article about how effectively Nokia's phone, the 610, still isn't cheap enough. And I have to say, I'm inclined to agree with you.
Yeah, and so we talked about this earlier, that Nokia still wants to go lower, and it's an important market to go after. But it's a curious question with how much they can cut back. Nokia at least has the power and leverage of being a massive phone developing company, so they make large orders, and you combine some of the Qualcomm chipsets that are out there that are low end, and you can start pushing the stuff down, and that's what's kind of happening. Of course, you don't want to compromise the user experience much, but as we had heard from Justin today, it doesn't sound like there will be much compromise. At least not, which is very
important as well.
Yeah,
because it's one of the things where if it's going to work at the lower end phone, I think hopefully what will shine through, and one of the things that you sort of looked at when you were talking about this in your in this article here, yes, they're making submissions, and yes, there are areas that where it won't be quite as high quality as the top end. But what matters is that smoothness of experience. I don't know if you've ever picked up one of the really low end Android phones and tried to struggle through the hell that is dealing with jerky operating system, apps that don't launch properly or pretend that they do but then don't. At least if users are told, oh, this app's not going to work very well on your phone, and the rest of the experience is going to be fine, I think that Microsoft are taking the right route here. And I think that Nokia are right to push them that way and to give them those options. It would be completely foolish of them to forget about the top end users, because we're the people who evangelize the platform and tell all our friends to go and get one. Side note, I bought my sister a Lumia 710 for her birthday and she absolutely loves it. That's one more set of people that's going to be told. But I think that having this what you called potentially the sub $100 smartphone region is going to be a really important push going forward. And if smartphones are going to truly bump out feature phones or dumb phones, whatever you want to call them, it's essential. And to beat Android on this plane is where you can really stand to grab the market share. And hopefully that will then push Windows Phone up past the Apples of the world as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, let's talk about
apps.
Yeah, let's talk about apps. We kept it relatively light this week, as we are on a time limit as always. So there's only two things that I wanted to pick out from apps this week. There's a couple of items, and you can go and have a look at. I think was it Gerbil Physics came out today.
Yeah, Gerbil Physics is good. I like it. It's a lot of fun.
I've not downloaded it yet. I've not downloaded it yet, and I fully intend to, but my day is kind of flying past me as I speak, so it's on the list of things to do. But Skype was released for beta, and we mentioned it last podcast, I believe. But what's since come of that is to talk about its limitations. For those who aren't familiar, effectively the problem is that you can have Skype and it works fine, as Justin has just shown previously. The sound quality is excellent. The app is actually quite stable. What we don't have at the moment is some kind of push notification for when someone's calling you. So you're only signed in on Skype when the app is physically in the foreground. Now, the interesting thing is Skype came back and sort of said, well, this is due to limitations of the platform. There's no way of background running it. There's no way of us just sort of hiding it away so that we can just prop up a call. And it's an interesting point because, as everyone quite rightly from our community just said, hang on a second, look at Tango. Tango does it absolutely fine. And this is Tango the app, not Tango the operating system. We should probably start calling it 7.5 refresh just to avoid the confusion. But they're saying it's a limitation of the platform. I want to know what your perspective is on this, Daniel, because for me it seems kind of like, if we're being honest, it does work on Tango. And yes, the push notification might take a little bit of time to get through, but it's better than nothing. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm kind of shocked by this too, that they decided it's too slow, and I don't know. I mean, obviously they've thought about this and have done some internal testing, but still a little bit surprising knowing that Tango, it works fine. We're talking about Tango, the VoIP app here, of course. And it's really disappointing. As we heard today with Justin calling in on his 610 via Skype, the sound quality is excellent. So they got the back end stuff working really well, but yeah, if you can't let it run in the background and receive messages, I mean, even instant messages, it's like, come on.
Yeah.
It should be at least able to receive instant messages. It seems like that's really killing the user experience. So I'm kind of really shocked and disappointed at that.
And at least if we had instant messages, then people could message you and say, come on Skype now, or get on your app, exactly. Just something. Yeah. And I would be disappointed if Skype didn't at least introduce a push messaging system for their for the Skype chat, because it's a pretty good chat client, Skype. I use it quite frequently.
Yeah.
So that's just one of the things to sort of say that we're a little bit disappointed about. But of course, remember that we can expect big things from Skype with Windows Phone 8 because it looks like it's going to be pretty front and center with features as you'd expect with Microsoft having purchased it.
Right.
So the other apps that I wanted to pull out this week, I'm going to let you talk here because my voice is going hoarse and because you've got more experience, was Nokia's Transport and Reader.
Yeah, I mean, actually, you can get a Transport right now in beta form, which it's an okay app. It's a little confusing, I think, to use and stuff, but it works pretty well. This is an app for helping you find bus routes and mass transit and stuff, and being able to get places. So it's kind of interesting. And their Reader app, of course, it's an ebook reader app, which is sort of interesting. It uses their own store to make purchases through. It's sort of akin to what HTC is doing with their movie store. Excuse me, I'm still sick from Barcelona. But
what did you pick up? Spanish flu?
No, I don't know. I've been sick for 2 weeks now. It's ridiculous. So,
get better soon.
Yeah, they're both interesting apps, but they weren't too crazy. These aren't game-changing apps, but they're sort of nice. I'm more interested in Nokia Drive 2, which is coming next week, and then 3 coming out soon too. So,
So what do we know about? I said I'm going to pull you back on that one. I agree with you on Reader, but transport actually looks quite interesting to me because I particularly like the layout of the app. It sort of showed routes and crossing over and which one might be considered faster, which one had less changes. It looked like the display and the user experience there is going to be key above the other transport apps. For those who don't know, I'm a big fan of London Travel, the app hit on Windows Phone. It pretty much makes my day possible with regards to knowing when tubes are going off. And if Nokia can come up with something that competes with that on a global scale, they'll be on to an absolute winner in terms of an improved experience for Windows Phone.
Yeah, like I said, it has potential. You can definitely go. You can go beta test it now if you want to. You can sign up for it.
Where do we sign up for that?
I think it's with Nokia Connect. Maybe we'll do a post on it later about how to sign up for it. But yeah, it's pretty seamless and painless. But I think you can even do it on other devices, which is interesting. But yeah, no, it's an interesting app. And if you live in an urban center and you're always taking public transportation, these things are kind of important. It does support New York City, which for me is pretty important for being able to use it. So it's just nice to see Nokia creating stuff. I was actually more impressed with their Mobile World Congress app that they created, which unfortunately I didn't know about to the last day. But it's actually a really nice app. And I say that because there is no good Mobile World Congress app for Windows Phone. And so Nokia kind of came out and filled that gap and actually made just one of those apps which just by itself is really beautiful and useful. So I hope they do it again next year, and I'm aware of it before I go so I can load it up on my phone. Yeah, but Nokia is definitely doing some really interesting things. And in fact, in the Mobile World Congress app, it was meant for people like me going around there. And if you find an app or something that Sony created, even on a different platform, like on Android, basically, say someone made an Android app, did something really neat, you could, within the app, write Nokia and be like, hey, look at this, and someone created this app, you should do it. And they would actually consider making that app. And so it was a way of getting like sort of crowdsourcing feedback on what people wanted. And I think it's this really nice arm of Nokia that is creating apps, and they're really serious. They have a whole section that is making apps for Windows Phone and for their users. So when you're buying a Nokia phone, you're not just getting their quality hardware and everything, but you're getting in their own mini ecosystem of apps, which we see they keep adding more and more stuff to. And you can definitely imagine, they're putting a big concentration on GPS and location-based services and this kind of thing. So this is really where they're going, leveraging their mapping technologies. And so that's something to keep an eye out for them.
Interesting question that just been asked by BHSF in our chat rooms, whether or not asking whether or not Nokia will release their apps to the marketplace at some point for general use. My understanding was that Nokia Maps was always supposed to be a general offering, but it looks like instead they're going down the route of integrating all that into the Bing system, as of course Bing Maps were just updated this last couple of weeks to now have a different overlay, which is also found its way into Nokia Maps. So I think we won't actually see Nokia release their general apps to the marketplace. I think they will be Nokia specific, kind of like HTC have their own specific ones, Samsung have their own specific ones. Nokia just seems to be putting a bit more effort into it than the other manufacturers, as we'd expect, really.
Yeah.
So right. I'm going to move on to one other thing I want to pick up, actually. There's the new firmware updates for the Lumia 800 and the 710. You're rocking the new 800 one, aren't you, at the moment?
What was that?
You're rocking the new Lumia 800 firmware.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, both phones, 710 and the 800. I have the new firmware on both, and excellent. I mean, I had the 500. I forgot what it was. The firmware that my 800 shipped with was the international unlocked firmware, and it was pretty terrible. I'm not gonna, mince words here. The battery life was pretty atrocious. It was just for a Windows Phone, it was the worst I'd ever seen. And so I had no compunction about going out and forcing the update and doing a flash on my device, even risking everything just to get the new firmware. And it was totally worth it. The new firmware is like it's night and day between battery difference. I can easily go 2 days now with the Lumia 800. And a lot of things, the lighting is better, and just they fixed a lot of bugs on it. Now I'm giving Nokia a little slack here too, like Dell. I think Nokia is new to the scene. They haven't figured out how to optimize the firmwares and the hardware completely yet. It stinks in a way. We're kind of beta testing it a little bit for them. on the other hand, this is kind of what people wanted, right? They wanted Nokia to push out these phones as quickly as possible and said, you got to get them out, got to get them out. Well, they're going to come out. They're going to be a little bit rough at first. But I think, once Nokia learns these principles of what works and how to manage battery life and everything, they're going to apply that to all their other Windows phones, meaning we won't see that in the future, just like how we don't really see it much with HTC, right? HTC sort of nailed down what works on their devices, but even they still have problems every once in a while. So
exactly, and I'd say I can't wait. That battery update can't go quickly enough for me for my Lumia, because I do get a bit fed up with it running out easily under a day. So fingers crossed that will find its way into the official channels very, very, very soon. I'm hoping to be able to report about it on the next podcast. Okay, so we're going to move on to community. It brings into the last few minutes of the podcast, and I want to find out any questions. So chat room, if you've got any questions that you want to ask us, send them through now, and we will pick up the question that was asked earlier on in the podcast as well. But we're going to go to the comments from last time, which of course was our Jeff Wilcox interview. If you missed it, that was posted out on 16th of February. We've got a couple of comments. We've got someone mentioning that Microsoft stock has crossed the $31 mark. That's great news, and a lot of people were very happy about that. Pizza Loving Hulk says WP Central is the best. Oh, thank you very much. Sly Gamer has asked me to get a windsock for my microphone. Hopefully I'm putting it in a different position, so this is going to be noticeable today. Moving on to some slightly more serious comments. Honky McGee, great name, says it's good to hear about progress on Sonic's Jewels, or rather Blue Tomato. Does anyone know when it hits the update, will it update or overwrite Sonic's Jewels, or will it be a new app? Obviously the update has come through now. It is Blue Tomato. I haven't had a chance to actually use that yet. I tried to start up the other day and play a game, but I got distracted by something else. So you using it, Daniel? Blue Tomato?
Oh, it's so good. Yeah, Blue Tomatoes. Yeah. It's just fantastic. And I'll announce right now that Purple Cherry, which is the Game Boy, the Game Boy emulator, has passed certification and is on the way to the marketplace. So we'll have a post up on that actually pretty soon as it goes live. But it's same developer, same system, and it has the SkyDrive support, everything. So if you're big into Game Boy games, you'll definitely want to check it out. I love this developer. I think he's done a fantastic job with these emulators. And so the Game Boy one is going to be really nice if you like playing old Nintendo games. So
that sounds awesome. I can't wait for that one, I have to say. Chili Satan said to us last week, he knows this gets asked a lot, but what is happening with old Xbox Live games? Are they getting fast app switching added? He saw a demo with Angry Birds doing this, and yet he has to reload every single time. And he's got a very good point, actually. It's getting on quite late now for us not to have all the Xbox Live titles. I remember raising this in our podcast before Mango actually came out, particularly around the Angry Birds issue. Microsoft, if you're listening, if anyone's listening, the Xbox Live titles need updates to get them into Mango ready.
Well, we just had Connectables just got a
Connectables got it, but it's not. Daniel, let's be honest, it's not quick enough, especially something as big as Angry Birds.
Yeah. I'm saying I know. Through.
Yeah. So we don't usually fight, but we're gonna have a bit of a moment there.
No, I'm not disagreeing. I'm just saying that we're at least getting some of them are coming out. So
it's definitely the better. It's definitely better for us as far as I'm concerned. If you're using, the main reason for me to use fast app switching is games. I want to be able to pop out and pop straight back in again. So hopefully that will come in quite soon. Let's go to questions from our chat room. Start off with the first one, which I'm going to put an answer to. People were asking, will Windows Phone 8 Apollo be updatable or be possible to update our current hardware? Which is a huge question. We've answered it before. We've answered it in the forums. We've answered it to the best of our knowledge in comments and articles. The short answer is there's no firm word at the moment. If you really care about having Windows Phone 8 the day it comes out, my personal advice to you would be to either pick up a phone now on a short contract or no contract, and make sure that you have a contract that will expire for you to be able to pick up the Windows Phone 8 when they happen. But honestly, why wouldn't you pick up a Windows Phone 7 now? Because the platform as it is fantastic. And if you like what you see right now when you hold it in your hand, that tells you whether or not to buy it. So that's my personal advice to you. But we haven't had anything official from Microsoft yet. We hopefully will at some point in the future. And that's all I'll say. Unless you want to add anything, Daniel.
No, that's pretty much it.
Okay. So let's go to questions. Chronix asks, in terms of hardware, why hasn't Microsoft encouraged hardware makers to make improvements in the GPU and battery life so Xbox on Windows Phone can shine? It is an interesting question, especially with the iPad announcement this week. Graphically, I think maybe it is time for a bit of a boost for Windows Phone. Although part of the games that I play aren't graphically intensive. I don't know about you, Daniel, but I'm more of a jump in, jump out person.
Yeah, I think with Apollo, you'll see this happen. So
good.
That's it. I'm dying here. I'm like coughing.
It's fine if you get chance. If between coughs you get a chance to pick out any questions you want to answer, but I'll carry on otherwise. BHSF has said he'd like to see a show with us guys joining the WP Dev podcast crew. That's not the first one that's been asked. Actually, we'll maybe look into that. Vincent Hackmat has. Okay, we can do that. Okay, well, I'll let Daniel. Okay, that's Daniel volunteering. Thank you very much, Daniel. Round of applause. You really are dying over there, man. You're all right.
I am.
Should I call 911? Yeah. See, I remember the American version. Vincent Hackmat has said he'd like to see a weather live tile that shows tomorrow's weather or weather in a few hours, not the current one. Very good point, actually. Maybe I'll write an app for that. And Jason Coyne wants a free giveaway prize. Let's see what else you've got. Jim Otagi is asking, what's our best guess for when the first Apollo phones will be in the shops? Have you got any idea on that one? I want to say October, but it seems like it's now too soon.
What was the question?
Were you busy coughing? What's your best guess for when the first Apollo phones will be in the shops?
November.
Okay, yeah. I think we'll see something at the end of this year as well. It would fit with the pattern that we've seen so far. Stephen McAteer Jr. Says, whoever the developer of Carbon is, they are awesome. Could we get them on? The app rocks. Good request. I think we could have the Carbon developers on, couldn't we?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, we'll get in touch with them.
And I agree. They're good developers.
Yeah. Are you using Carbon?
Yes. Carbon is it's one of my favorite Twitter apps. It's really, really nice, and I highly recommend it. So, although tune in, I think tomorrow I'll have another Twitter app that's not out yet that you guys will see. That's really nice.
Oh wow. Mobile Dom's asking a question that I want to ask you, actually. Daniel, would you say that the Lumia 800 update supposedly triples battery life? Would you personally agree with that claim?
That was my claim.
There you go. So personally, he's personally recommending that.
Yeah, I mean, I said that. That went around all the blogs. Like that was me. Yeah, so I do stick with that.
So there we go. And then there's an awful lot of people telling you to take cough drops or cough syrup of some kind.
I'm all out of them, and I took cough suppressant, 2 of them.
So if Daniel's not around the next podcast in 2 weeks, we'll know why. It's because he's coughed and just fallen over. Do AT&T? Will AT&T have 3G with the 800, or will it be 4G? Can you Wi-Fi hotspot with the 800?
So my 800 is two. There's 2 800s out there. Okay, this is important to know. The one I have is missing one AT&T band. So this is the international unlocked version. So it actually gets AT&T 3G HSPA. But it often drops the signal back to edge sometimes because it's only getting that signal some of the time. So it totally works here, and I really don't have a problem with it. It's not as fast as I would like. I don't know if it's getting HSPA plus. Now, there is a second version, the one that you can buy through the Amazon Wireless. We just did this story on, and you can buy at the Microsoft stores, and that does have the proper AT&T bands. So hotspot, no. Nokia still has not figured that out yet. So it's coming, but they haven't figured it out yet.
Fingers still crossed for that one. It's certainly not made its way over here yet. And that about wraps us up. Daniel, do you want to take us out, or is your voice dead?
No, I'll just cough. So you could.
Okay. All right. So you can find us all on Twitter at WP Central. You can find Daniel when he's not busy coughing his lungs out at Malatester77. George, our reviews editor, is at Coppertop004. Rich, the other British guy, is at Rich Edmonds. Myself at JAYT Bennett with 2 N's and 2 T's. Paul, our games reviews editor at SegaCon, and Raphael, when he shows up, is at Within Raphael. Then we have Matt at Rogue Code, and of course Big D5 or at Big_D5, who looks after our forums. And if you want, you can also follow Justin Angel, who of course was our guest today. I'd like to say personal thanks to him for coming on the show. He's at Justin Angel. This has been a Mobile Nations podcast. Please go to mobilenations.com for more great shows covering everything mobile, or you can head over to WP Central forums if you'd like to get involved with our community and discussing more about Windows Phone news, devices and apps. I also want to say a big thanks to WP Central Store for sponsoring the podcast, and thanks to the great artists from ccmixer.org for offering us a huge database of Creative Commons music, and you can find more information about all of that at the bottom of this podcast article. one quick question someone has asked me, am I going to the next Windows Phone user group? I would love to go, but there's a good chance I'll be on call from work, so we'll have to see how that goes. Thank you to everybody who's been in the podcast chat room and had joined us here for our little talk. And yes, Audible is also our sponsor for this podcast. That's just about it from me. Daniel, anything to add on to that?
Hopefully we'll be back soon. That's it.
Yep.
Hopefully I won't be sick.
Hopefully you won't be sick, and hopefully we should be back in 2 weeks, guys. WP Central will from this point forward be a 2-weekly podcast, or fortnightly if you like being British like I do. So yes, thank you everybody for joining us, and the podcast will be up hopefully in the next 24 to 48 hours.
There you go. Take care, everybody. Thanks a lot.